I immediately regret this decision. Hey zombies! This video has been highly requested for a very long time, so I hope this helps those of you who have asked for it. As you've already gathered from the title, this is a video all about my recommendations for an FX starter kit. This is going to cover a lot of information, so let me first give you a quick rundown of how this video is going to be organized. I'll be breaking what you need down into 3 main categories. Makeup products that you'll need to build an FX look from scratch, adhere, paint, seal, remove all the components, and then some. Then we'll talk about what disposable items and/or sanitation tools you'll need. I put these 2 things into one category because they frequently overlap, and an other category for things that don't quite fall into either of those. All in all, this will cover my personal recommendation on what I think you should aim to have for a basic FX kit, but I also want to cater to people who are looking for more or less than my recommendation. So if you have most of the products I'm mentioning already and you have a little more doll hairs to spend, I'll be listing extra things that I think will be useful once you have the base recommendation covered. And on the flip side of that, I know some of you want to spend as little as possible to start and only want to know what the absolute essentials are, so at the end I will also go over the bare bones minimum to get your kit rolling. These recommendations are all based on what's called out-of-kit makeup, which means they're products you can use to create many looks while on set or freelancing. It means I will not be going over products like sculpting and prosthetic making tools because that's not something you generally do on the actual job, you do it days, weeks, or months beforehand. While I am approaching this with the new freelance makeup artist in mind, you do not need to be a working MUA to benefit off of or use this list. This list also does not include what I would call general makeup kit essentials, things like tissues or mints, etc., stuff that every working MUA should have in their kit whether they're doing beauty or SFX makeup. But mayhaps that's another video for another time. This is strictly for FX related things I found I used a lot when freelancing and that most other FX MUAs I worked with had in their kits. What you could have in your kit can go way beyond this, and like all opinions, mine might differ from someone else with a different work experience. So don't think that this is a complete list of every FX thing ever or the end-all be-all. If you need to jump to any particular part, I'll leave some time codes in the description below. And lastly, I don't even like feeling like this needs to be said because if done honestly it shouldn't matter, but because I will be mentioning a lot of specific products in this video, I want to put out the quick disclaimer that this video is not in any way sponsored. No companies asked me to talk about these products, whether for money or free product, though I honestly wish some of them would because there's some FX brands that I freaking adore and would love to work with, but I digress. If this matters to you, 100% of the things you see in this video are things I bought with my own money or were in the original FX starter kit that my mentor handed down to me long before I was on social media. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. You're going to want to make sure that you have at least one, but hopefully a couple different options to do each of these things. To build a look, adhere items, paint a look, seal a look, and remove everything safely. So, to build a look, I recommend having at least 2 of these options: liquid latex, FX gelatin, and/or 3rd degree. Liquid latex is a staple of special effects makeup, and it's extremely versatile. You can create gashes, wounds, burns, old age wrinkles, blisters, peeling skin, etc. You can mix it with other things like cotton to make fake teeth out of it, or create structure and texture in what you're building. Latex is easy to work with, relatively cheap, and easy to find. The major downsides is that many people have latex allergies. Many brands of latex have a strong smell, making it not the most pleasant choice for your model or actor, and it takes longer to dry and set than other mediums. Latex generally runs around $2 to $3 American per ounce, but it can go up to $4 or $5 an ounce if you're buying overpriced small amounts from a seasonal Halloween store. I prefer the liquid latex that is the store brand from Nigel's, which is a pro makeup supply store here in LA, but you can find most all their products on their website too. But their latex is very, very mild in smell unlike other brands, it's priced appropriately, and it's not too thick or thin. FX gelatin is a medium that needs to be melted to use and then sets when cooled. The plus sides of gelatin is that you can buy it pre-made, ready to melt, or you can make it yourself with a few simple ingredients. It is extremely cheap when homemade, it's easy to build up in size quickly, and if it's still clean, it can be melted back down and reused for another look. The downsides are that it's used hot or warm, so you need to be extra careful not to burn yourself or your actor. It's difficult to get smooth edges, it doesn't stay on as well as other mediums since body heat can cause the contact points to start melting, it requires a microwave or some sort of heat pad to melt it, which is often difficult to have while you're on set, and it's not the easiest medium to control shape unless you're pouring it into a mold. If you're working freehand on set, gelatin is better used for things like burns, raised scars, burn scars, and weird or decaying skin texture. It's not very practical to build wounds or create a new nose shape, unless that shape is a drippy amorphous blob. Pre-made gelatin blocks can be found easily online through Amazon or FX supply sites, but you can very easily make your own FX gelatin by mixing and melting powdered unflavored gelatin found in your local supermarket, liquid glycerin, which is a skincare product found in many drugstores, and water. Most pre-made gelatin blocks are way overpriced at $4 to $7 an ounce, but I found that some are priced pretty low at around $1.60 an ounce. But homemade FX gelatin is still much cheaper. Following the recipe and ratio that I use in this video with gelatin and glycerin I found at a supermarket and drugstore, it comes out to about 70 cents an ounce. Third Degree is a skin-safe silicone that is liquid at first and sets to a solid, much like gelatin except that it's never hot. It comes in parts A and B, and you mix an equal amount of the two together when you're ready to use it, then you have a short working time to get it on your face the way that you want it. The pros are that it's much easier to use on location since it doesn't require being heated. I personally feel that it gives you much more control with the shape and building than gelatin does. It's easy to blend out uncured edges with 99% alcohol, and it stays better than gelatin since body heat is not as much of a factor. Unlike latex, it's easy to build this up in a shape without the use of cotton or anything like that. The biggest con is that it's significantly more expensive than latex or gelatin. Another potential con is that it has a bit of a higher learning curve. It takes much more practice, I'd say, than latex or gelatin to be able to use it properly and manipulate it how you want it, but it's quite simple once you get the hang of it. You can find Third Degree at Pro SFX supply stores or through multiple online avenues including Amazon, and as far as general price goes, like I said, Third Degree, while awesome, is very pricey. It runs for around $9.50 to $12 per ounce from pro stores and sites, and is even more expensive if you buy it from a third party from, say, like an Amazon seller. It is a more professional and versatile choice in many ways, but if you're just learning, this may not be the medium to start with. Next, onto adhesive options, aka sticky glue type things to attach prosthetics or other stuff to your face. There are many options here, but for starters, I'd recommend either Spirit Gum or Pros-Aide. Both are great for adhering prosthetics or other small things you might be gluing to a person, but they have different pros and cons. In my experience, they both adhere very well, though some would argue one is better than the other in that category. The way I see it, the main difference is I think between availability and comfort. Price-wise, they're pretty similar. Spirit Gum comes in somewhere around $2 to $9 an ounce, depending on how much you buy at once and where from, and Pros-Aide comes in overall a bit cheaper, between $2.50 and $5.50 an ounce. But Spirit Gum is arguably a little bit more accessible because while both are easily found online, you only ever really see Spirit Gum in pop-up Halloween stores. However, I prefer Pros-Aide nearly always, with the exception of applying bald caps or crepe hair, which I like Spirit Gum more for. But first, I find Pros-Aide is way more comfortable. Spirit Gum gets very hard, crusty, and itchy at times, and more frequently leaves skin red and irritated, but Pros-Aide is water-based and better for sensitive skin. Spirit Gum requires a specific remover or isopropyl myrostate, while I found Pros-Aide to remove rather easily with soap and warm water, or even with makeup wipes, though I still do recommend using isopropyl myrostate for either. Also, getting Spirit Gum in your hair or brows is a nightmare, whereas getting Pros-Aide in either isn't. My recommendation, if you don't mind ordering online, I'd recommend getting Pros-Aide. When you have whatever it is you need on your face, you'll have to paint it with something. Some options I would recommend would be water-activated paints, alcohol-activated paints, or cream/grease paints. If you can, I recommend having all three of these types because I think that they all do different but important jobs, but here's the main difference between them. Self-explanatory really, but water-activated paints are used by mixing water with the paint. The more water you use, the more transparent the color will deposit. The less water you use, the more opaque the color will deposit. This is a good option because they're fairly inexpensive, easy to use, safe to use on all areas of the body, they give you good control of the color, and they don't rub off too easily. They are really good for body painting, not so good for painting on foam latex pieces, but it can be done. The biggest con is that they're not sweatproof or rainproof. Since they are water-activated, it means that they come off very easily with water. Alcohol-activated paints are just like water-activated paints, except it requires, you guessed it, alcohol for use instead of water. That creates both big pluses and minuses. Unlike water-activated paints, they are much more long-lasting and durable since they hold up better through sweat or rain. You might wonder how often rain or sweat is an issue on jobs, but you'd be surprised. They can really save your zambooty. The downsides are that in general they're much more expensive, and it also requires you to buy 99% alcohol, specifically 99%, which is higher than the rubbing alcohol you find in drugstores. Alcohol-activated paints also cannot be used anywhere near the eye area because you try dripping alcohol in your eyeballs and then get back to me on how much fun it was. A good fix for the problems that arise with both water and alcohol-activated paints is the third option, grease/cream paints. These are usually inexpensive, can be safely used around the eye, and will do well on foam latex or even other mediums since they don't absorb into the material. The downsides are that you cannot control the opaqueness of the color the way that you can with the other two options, and the cream paints are very transferable. Transferable? Words. You would not want to use these for body painting. You can set them with a powder, but even then you don't want to go rubbing up against anything with a full face of cream paint. Think of it kind of like cream paints are to regular lipstick as water and alcohol paints are to liquid lipsticks. Superior in that regard. Hopefully you can see why it's hard to recommend one of these over the other since none of them are perfect for every scenario. Start with what you can and try to have at least the basic colors of each three options to suit your needs. Next, you'll want some things to set and seal your makeup looks. Translucent powder is a very basic staple to any makeup kit that you should have. This will help set grease paints as mentioned. It can also help remove shine from gelatin and silicone, or even just a sweaty face. And since it's translucent, it won't affect the color of what you're working on. My favorite translucent powder is Ben Nye's. You'll also probably want something to seal the overall finished makeup. These can help with a variety of issues, helping to make your creation sweat-proof, waterproof, smudge-proof, etc. If you're doing makeup on anyone that will need to wear the look for more than half an hour, you should use one. I really like Ben Nye's Final Seal for most prosthetic or build-up applications, or Kryolan's Fixing Spray, which is super heavy-duty and great for body painting. Next to taking it all off! A proper remover is vital for SFX makeup. Do not skip getting one of these if you will be using anything from the build and adhesive categories. I briefly mentioned that some adhesives come with specific removers like spirit gum. They are often sold together, and it is certainly a good idea to have this. However, more than anything, I recommend getting isopropyl myricate to remove all of your SFX needs. It's a greasy liquid that's found in a ton of things, from eye creams to deodorants to aftershave bombs to approximately a bajillion other things. But on its own, it's perfect for gently removing all the sticky crap you use in FX makeup. There is not a single thing I've used on my face or anyone else's that this stuff couldn't remove, including spirit gum in the baby hairs of the places you didn't even know that you had baby hairs until you had spirit gum on them. I'm not sure where you can find this in person, but if you just Google it, there's a ton of places that you can buy it online, besides FX stores, which do carry it in person, but I realize that most cities do not have FX supply stores the way that LA does. Closing out the products category, here's a few more things I recommend having in a starter kit. Blood. If you're an SFX artist, chances are you will need blood at some point in time. I'm just going to recommend blood in all shapes, sizes, colors, consistencies in general because to start, any will do. There's brighter reds for fresh blood looks, darker for aged blood. There's some that are wardrobe safe in case you're working near clothes or on a set that needs to not be stained pink forever. Heck, you can even get away with only using my most favoriteest thing ever, scab blood, for a lot of your looks. If you notice, I don't even use drippy blood for a lot of my most gory looks because scab blood works for me and it doesn't make such a mess. And if you're erring on the side of saving the most money possible, there's an endless amount of cheap DIY blood recipes you can find online to mix your own personal favorite. Rigid collodion is another product that I recommend, mainly because it does something that cannot be replicated with any of the build options previously mentioned. It's a really nasty product that more or less suctions the skin under which it's applied to form an indentation. It's really great for making fast scars in a way that not really anything else can, but just be careful because if removed improperly or applied over and over in the same place for a long period of time, it can leave you with real scars. On to the next of the three main kit categories, which is disposable and sanitary tools. Not all of these are disposable, and not all of these are for sanitation purposes, but they very often overlap. Sanitation is extremely important if you are using your kit for anyone other than yourself 100% of the time, so definitely keep their uses in mind. Cotton balls are a kit must in my opinion because they can be used for so many things. I use it for creative purposes like in latex buildups to make wounds or other shapes. I use it in gelatin even sometimes, to more functional tasks like using isopropyl myricate on a cotton ball to help remove sticky products. Q-tips are another kit must for many reasons. They serve as sanitary applicators for applying, say, blood in small areas or Prozade on a prosthetic. They can be used with isopropyl myricate as a way to get under the first few edges of a prosthetic during the removal process, and you'll find a million uses for these as you work, so it's always good to have some. Tongue depressors, aka popsicle sticks, are super helpful for a lot of occasions. I use them frequently to mix third degree or to stir and apply gelatin, that way I can toss them quickly after use instead of picking set product off of a non-disposable tool. I highly recommend having a metal spatula, aka cosmetic palette knife, because again, they have a lot of uses. You can use them for mixing third degree and gelatin, just like tongue depressors, if you don't mind cleaning them off frequently while working. I also like to use these to apply third degree since they can be pretty precise and are easy to use for quick blending into the skin. But more than anything, they're extremely useful for sanitation purposes. Any cream product you use on someone, you want to scoop out onto a separate working area first. You never want to work directly from your cream product to someone's face, because then every time you dip your applicator back into the cream product, you're contaminating it. Now, if you're only ever going to use that entire cream product on one face, that's totally okay, but otherwise, you need something to scoop the product out onto another area. You can use a tongue depressor for this as well. Speaking of which, that separate working area can be anything like a metal palette, plastic palette, or wax paper. If it's not disposable like wax paper, you will obviously need to clean it in between uses. Plastic is more porous than metal, so as far as sanitation goes, I typically prefer metal, but either will work just fine as long as it's cleaned in between different actors or models. To clean off your non-disposable products like spatulas and palettes, you'll want rubbing alcohol, 90% and above, the kind you'd find in drugstores. You can either wipe things down with the alcohol on a paper towel or a cotton ball, or you can put some alcohol in a little spray bottle for faster cleaning. Again, this needs to be done in between each new face you work on to prevent contamination. I recommend having a mix of plastic cups, some disposable, some not. I use the bigger cups that are non-disposable to pour latex into to keep my big bottle of latex sanitary, to keep blood sanitary, or to hold water for my water-activated paints. I use these small disposable measuring cups very frequently for measuring out equal parts A and B of third degree, and then once more for mixing both parts together. On that note, if you use gelatin, I recommend having at least one microwavable safe container to mix and heat the ingredients. White wedge sponges I use frequently for a variety of things, as an applicator for paint or latex, and especially for bruising. If you watch a lot of my videos, you've probably seen me rip one of these up on at least one occasion to make a really easy stamp for a bruise texture. These fall into this category because they're mostly disposable. They can be reused if soaked and cleaned well, but they should be replaced every so often too. Both are great for doing something similar to the ripped up white wedge sponge thing. They add texture when used with paints. I use black stipple sponges for anything from scratches to breaking up the foundation for a sickly look to fake freckles. I use sea sponges for softer, cloudier textures like bruises or even the wave sea foam from my first NYX Face Awards look. They're very versatile and can significantly cut down on application time, which is a very important option to have at any time-sensitive makeup gig. The last bit of essentials I recommend to cover your starter kit is the other category that is a bit random, but all very good to have. Starting with tissue paper. I recommend having this because it is very useful to use with latex to create buildups, as well as a quick tool to cover bad prosthetic edges in a bind or on a budget. Dry foods like ground coffee and or cereal is something I always have in my kit because they are extremely useful for creating unique texture quickly. Mixing ground coffee with latex is, in my opinion, the absolute easiest way to do a gnarly burn, and cereal like Honey Bunches of Oats is awesome to mix with latex for a weird infected skin look, or for fake vomit, or for any other yummy thing you can think of. 99% alcohol. I've already briefly touched on this product, but to quickly give it a little spotlight moment, this is a very high percent of alcohol and it is used for many things like activating alcohol paints where a lesser percentage will not work, and it is also used frequently to dissolve the edges of some FX materials like third degree or Pros-Aide transfers. Because this isn't found in your average drugstore, you will need to find this from an FX supply store or search for and order it online. Vaseline is a vital part of your kit because you should be using it often to coat your actor's brows and hairline before any latex or spirit gum is applied. It prevents lots of accidental waxing situations, and it also doubles as a great eye makeup remover. Boom! And, of course, brushes. You won't be able to apply everything with disposable products, so brushes are a must. I recommend buying cheap brushes if you know that you'll be using them with alcohol-activated paints, since the alcohol will dry out your brush, and I recommend paint brushes from a craft store for everything else like body painting, cream paints, etc. Okay, so that is what I think is vital to have in a starter kit if you have the option to get all of it. Now for some extras if you want to be real fancy and up your kit game a bit. These are still pretty basic, but they didn't make my main list because either something on my main list could already do the jobs of these things, just not as easily, or they're not used often enough in my opinion to be considered vital. But I do enjoy these products when they have an appropriate use. Colored tooth enamel and eye blood. While not vital to have, I think tooth enamel and eye blood are really quick, easy ways to level up a look. They're both a bit of a pain to use because they're a little bit uncomfortable and they don't last consistently for very long, but they can really sell a character if that character has bad teeth or creepy zombie-like eyes. I really love having these little plastic syringes for things like dripping blood in specific places or creating specific shapes when filled with hot gelatin. Also not vital, but very useful when appropriate. Alright, I'm putting FX wax on this list, and you might wonder why it wasn't on my list of vitals in the first place, and that is 100% because I kind of hate it. FX wax being most notably Ben Nye Scar Wax or Kryolan's Sinewax. But I'll admit, sometimes I find myself thinking it's the best option for certain jobs. And every time I think that, and I use it, I end up cursing its name all over again. While I think it's very hard to work with, heavy, awful in areas with movement, and particularly awful in hot or cold temperatures, it can look nice for a short time if you get it to cooperate. There are definitely things to make it more pleasant, like using lotion or Vaseline to remove some of the stickiness during the work stages, adhering it better with Prozade or sealing it with liquid latex, but I still think it's the literal devil. Yes, literal. It speaks to me sometimes and tells me to do bad things like to use it or to bathe in a tub of green glitter. But alas, some people swear by it, and you should definitely know it's another option, but you won't ever see me list this as a kit must-have. Pretty self-explanatory, but this stuff is really good for making you look dirty real fast in a way that paints either can't do as well or take a lot longer to achieve. It's also the sanitary option to using real dirt or charcoal. Perfect for if you need to look like you just fell down a chimney or you're running away from a psycho killer with a chainsaw in the middle of a desert. It never hurts to have a couple ready-made bald caps in your kit for when you need it, or at least a way to make them fairly quickly. In a bind, it's obviously better to have them pre-made, but pre-made ones are either expensive or really crappy with thick edges. So if you want to customize the edges of your bald cap and hopefully save a little money, you can make your own in an hour or two using a redhead from Kryolan. You just dab liquid latex in several thin coats over the head until it's all dry and then bald cap worthy. You can use a head-sized blown-up balloon for this too, though I think it's much easier and worth the money to just invest in a redhead. Yeah. For wet-looking burns, faux beads of sweat, or a conversation starter. You can block out your brows using Prozade, so this didn't make the vital list, but if you prefer to use a glue stick or you find it easier, this is a good cheap way to get rid of the hairy caterpillars chilling over your eyeballs. I'm out of this, so I'm sorry for the stock photo, but this product is really helpful to properly seal latex pieces, both regular and foam, before painting them with certain kinds of paint. For example, you ordinarily wouldn't want to use water-activated paints or regular foundation on a foam latex piece because it absorbs so much of the product. But if you were to use cast or seal on the piece first, you'd be able to apply either with a much better result. I don't think it's vital because I think you can get around needing this, or at least you wouldn't need to use it often, but if you paint on latex or foam a lot, I would definitely recommend picking it up. It's not vital because you can certainly take the good old-fashioned route of patience, but if you're using latex on any job, it's very helpful to have one of these handy. It's nice to get the actor out of your chair quicker when you can, and it would be a huge pain in the butt to not have one of these to dry your latex layers for old age stippling especially. These are definitely a fancier add-on, but they can be extremely useful if you need to make consistent prosthetic pieces several days in a row, but you don't have the time or means to create a mold yourself. These are little pre-made mold trays that you can fill in with silicone, gelatin, or latex while on set to quickly pop out what you need. And lastly, an airbrush. It is definitely the most pricey thing on the list, but if you work on set and can afford to get one of these, you absolutely should. These are very fast, very sanitary, and just all around so awesome and useful to have. You can easily use stencils with an airbrush, paint latex before it's totally dry if you're in a time crunch, you can cover large areas super fast, blah 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 blah, the list goes on. If these weren't so expensive, and if you couldn't replicate most of what you can do with an airbrush with other paint and application techniques, this would be on my vitals list. But since they are, and you can, it'll stay here in the fancy kit add-ons list. Lastly, I know some of you are watching this right now with some serious sticker shock after seeing just how much money goes into the kit of an aspiring or professional makeup artist, even just to start. I know that my vitals list is not feasible to start for many of you, let alone the add-ons, and keep in mind it takes most people years to acquire even most of the basics. I was lucky enough, as I briefly mentioned earlier, that I had a mentor who gave me a small kit of my own with a lot of the things on my vitals list when I first started SFX, but anything not already in that small kit took me years to gather, as well as it can be really hard making money when you're just starting out in makeup. So for those of you who are building a kit on a tight budget, who are maybe aspiring MUAs but you aren't sure if it's a serious enough thing yet that you want to pour a lot of money into it, or if you're someone who just wants to know the absolute basic things that you should spend money on first to cover a lot of your bases, here's what I'd say is the bare bones minimum of what you should focus on to get started. one item from the build list that is either latex, gelatin, or 3rd degree. Most likely latex or gelatin since they're much less expensive. One type of adhesive, either Spiricum or Prozaid. One type of paint palette with basic colors. Most likely water activated paints since they're the most versatile for the money. One type of remover. Most likely isopropyl myrostate since it works with all the things. Some type of applicator, whether that's a mix of Q-tips and a few of the cheapest brushes you can find, or some sponges. You can use the ends of brushes to scoop out product onto a lid or something to that effect to keep things sanitary still. Cotton, coffee, cereal, and tissue paper, because they're all inexpensive and you can create so many different buildups if you have just those few staples. Blood, because it's hard to replicate, cheap to make, and is used often enough you'll probably wish you had it. And powder, even if it's baby powder, because you will need it often to set makeup. If you can find even the simplest, cheapest versions of all those things, you will be able to do so many SFX looks. Any body paint, burns, wounds, zombie looks, old age makeup, scars, infection, heck, you could build an entire full face of prosthetics from scratch by sculpting cotton and latex on someone's face and painting it with a couple colors. Please do not think that just because you don't have all of these things on this list that you can't still do a lot with having at least some of them. While I love beauty makeup, SFX has always appealed to me more because it really requires you to get creative with your products, tools, and things you'd never even think you might use in a makeup look. The most inspiring and legendary artists who pioneered the SFX makeup industry often did so by thinking way outside of the box to put the right things together to achieve the look that they needed. My absolute idol, Dick Smith, is a great example of someone who continuously found creative and unconventional ways to bring SFX ideas to life, and he was someone who was more than happy to share what he knew. He's a big reason why I was able to teach myself so much about FX makeup up until this point, and he's a very big reason why I'm inspired to pass on what I know, even though it's nowhere near all the things that he knew and could teach people. So I hope this video is a big help to you guys and you feel really clear about what products you might need and why. If there's anything I didn't explain enough or you have any other questions, please leave them down in the comments below and I will try my best to answer them. Never stop dreaming and never stop learning, zombies. It is cheesy, but true. Okay, bye.